Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where it is you're listening. And welcome to AI and the Future of Work, the weekly podcast where we discuss the future of work with entrepreneurs, technologists, venture capitalists, journalists. I am your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of Insight Finder, the AI-first system of intelligence for IT operations, and the executive chairman of PeopleRain, the leading platform for automating IT and HR employee service. We talk a lot on this show about the power of biased AI to inhibit professional growth for women and underrepresented minorities. But we also talk about the power of AI to make humans better by augmenting our own intelligence. Each week we try to reconcile those polar opposites, and today we're going to focus on how AI is making life better. Today's guest is an executive at one of the most successful tech companies in Silicon Valley. But more important, she's been a vocal advocate for women in technology and is one of the reasons Silicon Valley has a social conscience and a fragile glass ceiling. Patty's an executive at Palo Alto Networks by day. The company was founded in 2005, boasts an impressive 70,000 customers, including 85 of the Fortune 100. It was first a network security company, an early leader in the sale of firewalls, since has branched into cybersecurity by acquisition. Company's got a $24 billion market cap and over 7,000 employees. Patty's one of the key ones. Before serving at Palo Alto Networks as the SVP of Global Customer Services, Patty had a distinguished career as a board member, a startup CEO whisperer, and an executive at Cisco and McAfee and others. I'm so excited for today's discussion, eager for you all to get to know Patty. Patty, welcome to the podcast. Maybe share a little bit more of your background and how you got into the space.
Well, first I have to say, I've never been called a CEO whisperer before, so that's a new fun thing for a Friday. But great
Put
to
it on your CV.
Yes, exactly. I will. I'll update LinkedIn as soon as we're done today. But thanks for having me. It's great to chat with you again. Yeah, it's interesting. So I come from an engineering background, 2 engineering degrees from a fairly nerdy school in Pittsburgh. When my first job, I consider myself wildly fortunate. My first job was in Bell Laboratories, which at the time was kind of the Google of the world then. And, just the people that were there were incredible. You could work on everything. You ended up working on a variety of different things in different countries. And one thing that I actually think really helped shape my career very early on was my very first boss. So I was still a baby out of grad school. And AT&T was having the challenge at the time of how to get the best out of Bell Labs and, how to take all these brilliant people and really move them into the market so that our customers were really feeling the impact of the organization. I was in one of these experimental pods of what we were doing with Bell Labs at the time, and we were having a lot of success in the US. And so, again, baby out of grad school, just picture that. I come into work, it was in New Jersey, of course, when AT&T was still based there. And my boss calls me in and he's like, "Oh, hey, Patty, I have a plan." Okay. Oh, Monday morning plan. Love it. Can't wait to hear your plan. And he says, "Here's my plan. You move to Europe, build a business like we're building here in the US, go to Europe, build that business, come back. That's my plan." I'm like, okay. So the total of my European experience at the time was 4 days in Munich after I graduated grad school. And that was it. That was all. It was I look back on that, my life could have gone in such different directions because I thought, hey, I'd learn a lot. What could go wrong? This will be fun no matter what, even if it goes pear-shaped. So I figured out, hey, what country should I move to? How do I meet the other people that I need to? What would customers in Europe I know I'll find them, but what do they want to buy? What would they buy from AT&T? What would they buy from Bell? You know, everything. And it turns out that it was the best experience. But you think about how a lot of folks like, let's make sure how would I be successful? You know, what are the metrics? I need to be able to beat every metric before I take that kind of plunge. And I think those sorts of opportunities where you're always doing your best, you're always pushing the envelope, you take every new, very different role, very different opportunity, and in, you know, different geographies, you learn so much. And it enhances you as a person. It enhances you as a leader, as an employee, as a business person. And I just look back on that experience as just incredible. So my little experiment ended up 6 years over there, building a business that was even more successful than what was going on, what had continued in the US. And just learned a lifetime of lessons that were centered around, just listen to the customer, they'll tell you what they want. And then you just have to figure out how to deliver it. So that's actually what got me in the services space to begin with. So 6 years in Europe, moved back, ran the services business for AT&T back in the US. After AT&T took a turn in Cisco, where I joined in 2004. So right when Cisco was starting to come out of the early 2000 doldrums, and my job was to figure out how to reassemble the pieces of the company to make it profitable and successful, given it was going to be a lower growth. You know, how do you make a profitable Cisco at single digit growth as opposed to 50% year over year growth? And so that was fascinating. And at the time when I was at AT&T, our biggest technology partner was Cisco. So it was literally going on the other side of the coin and driving the transformation from inside. The great fun there for 6 years, then to McAfee, where, you know, it seems like my career has gone in a lot of different lines, because go from services, you know, P&L, to internal transformation leader at Cisco. At McAfee, I did my stint as a CIO and COO, and you learn so much. I tell people all the time, CIO is the best thing to have done. You know, it's such an important job, but it is thankless. And the strong CIOs really make a difference across the whole company. For enterprises, it's such an important role, but it is a tough role. But I learned a ton. That was a great job to have. It really makes you sympathetic for, you know, as you're in a technology company, sympathetic to what your customers are going through. So it's like, I encourage any technology executive, you should really take a run at leading or being in an IT organization. It really makes you understand what you need to do with your products and services to make them as user-friendly as possible. A fun run at McAfee. And then when I left there, McAfee and Intel Security, I thought, okay, I want to do something a little different. Well, let's say very different. So then I wanted to join a public company board and start work with early stage companies. And so I was very fortunate to do that for a couple of years until I decided it was time for me to go back to an operating role and joined Palo Alto Networks.
You must listen to the episode that we did with Mark Settle, who
yes,
serial CIO. He wrote the book Truth from the Valley about what it means to be a CIO. Most recently, the CIO at Okta. Mm-hmm. But I think he's a 7-time CIO, and shares all of the same scars and laments and challenges.
Yes, great Mark is a great guy.
He's wonderful. Guy. So you evolved into this role as a board member, a CEO coach, startup CEO whisperer. The thing I want to know is, who is, so tell me a story. So who is the CEO you met that just blew you away? Where you said, maybe the world doesn't know her or possibly him yet, but they will. What was that like best first impression you've ever had?
Maybe I'll use it because I'm a very strong fan of this gentleman. So maybe I'll use a different example. So yeah, I'll use the example of Pat Calhoun. So he and I had worked together at Cisco and at McAfee. And when he left McAfee, he went to ServiceNow.
He joined me at ServiceNow.
Yeah,
that was where he and I met.
It is okay. It's too small a world. I did not realize that, but so we kept in touch after he left McAfee, and a couple years later, he said, "Hey, Patty, I have an idea. Let's meet for coffee. I have an idea." I'm like, "Okay, here we go." I was just so impressed seeing somebody to go from I'm writing an idea on a napkin, literally in a coffee shop, to where he has taken his company now is expressive, multiple rounds of funding, very strong customers, very strong product. He really led in the automation. Now there are a lot of fast followers, but I still believe his company has the lead in the whole automation of IT service management. And that's kind of near and dear to my heart, just having lived in the CIO role. That is such a pain point for IT organizations. It's so, if you can get it right, it's so impactful across your broad base of employees. It was just, he had the right idea at the right time, found and developed the right technology, built a great team. So it's super exciting to see what he's been able to build. But it really is a combination of he listened when he went into that market. He hadn't been years and years in that space, but he took a fresh perspective of, okay, how can we really transform this? We see all the issues that enterprises are having in the service management space, but how could we do this fundamentally differently, fundamentally better? And if we did, would that unlock a lot of value for the employee base? So it was, his attention to listening to customers, his ability to see something better than what everybody was swimming in that market at the time. So I'm just a huge fan. He just keeps moving forward, is very good at finding the right team members, and really focuses on making sure he and everybody around him is listening to the customers.
Now, you've been a part of some iconic cultures and presumably learned from some iconic leaders, including the great John Chambers. Talk to us about your leadership style. What have you learned from some of the cultures you've been around, and how do you incorporate that into your leadership style?
Yeah, my leadership style is pretty eclectic, but I have a few principles. So basic things like, I would never ask anybody to do something that I'm not willing to do, like number of hours, amount of travel. You always want to put yourself in the shoes of the rest of your team. I consider myself, very hands-on. I want to understand. I want to help drive things forward. I just find that very, 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 very important. I try to have myself a view of how I see the market. I have my worldview of how the industry is going, politics across in the different geographies, and how that's going to impact companies. And I try to encourage the rest of my organization to develop their own worldview. You could say, there's a bit in my first story around, moving to Europe very early in my career. I had to listen. I had to seek to understand what was going on. And I really think that's so important. When you look at a lot of a lot of folks, a lot of executives, people will put themselves in a box and say, well, this is what I know, so then I'm just going to stay in this box and the world must continue in the same path. The world's not continuing in this in any particular path right now. Change is just happening faster, especially with the pandemic, especially with the, unusual economic situation that we're in. I see trends that were moving fairly quickly before are now, it's like somebody put their foot on the accelerator and we are flying into different spaces. So I really try to encourage everybody to look up, don't get lost in the day-to-day. You've got to look up and see the bigger picture. You've got to synthesize what's going on. And I try to put myself in the shoes of my customers and my folks. What are they dealing with? How do I make this easier? What can we do differently as an organization, as leaders in an organization? So I would say very hands-on, very much tried to listen, and pretty much willing to break any rule to get where we need to go.
How has the pandemic changed you as a leader, even at a tactical level? Is there anything you're doing now that maybe you didn't have to do a year ago?
Well, I would say I'm fairly tired of sitting in the same place that I have been for the past few months. But it's interesting. We were kind of joking in our organization when the pandemic was happening, because a number of our products are around how do you secure remote access for enterprise employees. Fairly topical subject. And we experience, because customers are like, we need help and we need it now, and we need to be able to securely have our employees working remotely now. So as you can imagine, the volume of customer inquiries and need for help, 400% at one point in the spring. So it's just this step function up. We're like, okay, we need to do some things fundamentally differently. You just can't all of a sudden hire all these people. We've got to think of how do we do this differently. And it was interesting. I look at some of the things that we were doing and how do you help customers answer their questions in an automated way. And there was a little bit of a school of thought of, well, we have to go through this process and we don't have the right technology, so we're not going to be able to drive these deflections or sort of self-services as fast as we wanted until the pandemic hit. And then all of a sudden no, this is going to take a long time and it's going to take 6 months before we see any improvement. It's like, we're getting crushed by volumes. We don't have 6 months. And it was amazing to see what people, when the need is really there, how out of the box people will think and how fast the results can come as a follow-on to that. So that was a great learning. It was great to see how open people can be and how you kind of really make lemonade out of lemons. Because folks, when everybody saw the results of that, these deflection numbers and how we're able to provide a great new experience for customers when nobody thought that was going to be possible, you use that to encourage okay, how can we do more of this? Look what we did. How can we do more of this? So you have to take every positive step and use that to encourage more of that out of the box behavior, because right now everybody's in such an odd, weird, this has never happened before mode, and finding those opportunities to really be encouraging to folks of, hey, look what don't get down, look what we've been able to do. This was bigger, better than what we ever thought we would do, forget the pandemic, if we all had been working normally. So, really reminding folks of sometimes it's a gift forcing you to think differently. So that's one piece. And another The other side of that same coin is, and you see it in a lot of the technology companies that didn't miss a beat as everybody's working remotely. So people are working harder than they ever have before. I have to say, I've never found myself trying to remind my organization of, you have to take a break. Remember, this is a marathon. we might be sprinting right now, but we have to save our strength. This is a marathon. You know, being more conscious of helping people to find a balance, because at a certain point, all everybody's doing is work. For a number of months, there was nothing to do. If you're in a technology company, there was nothing to do but work. And at a certain point, you can see people starting to hit the walls. So being more encouraging for folks of, okay, it's time for a balance, even if the balance just is, please lay off Zoom for the afternoon. Just, lock your laptop away, lock your phone away, and give yourself a little break. Because one of the things I'm seeing with the pandemic is the stress is, it's like month after month of built up stress, month after month of built up, like working double what you had previously been doing. And that was already a lot. I personally think it gets, as we go into the winter months, it gets harder, because then cold and flu season, let alone a second wave, people are going to be worried more. It's going to be colder, especially in, we're kind of lucky out here in California, but, well, since the fires have stopped, but, in other climates where it's cold and it's dark and you're stuck inside. I think we all have to give ourselves permission to have a minute to get your mind around things. And then also, as leaders, make sure that you really have your finger on the pulse of your organization, that you're not just, always with your foot on the accelerator, because it is so easy to get burnt out that way, just with all the angst that everybody has right now.
One of the unfortunate things about the pandemic is it has adversely impacted women and underrepresented minorities more than others.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've been a vocal, visible advocate for women in technology careers. Curious to know, from your speaking, your listening, share with our audience, take the pulse of at least the female community. Are they particularly discouraged? Are they energized? How are they feeling about kind of the direction that the Valley's going?
Well, I'll answer this in a couple different ways. When I first got here, so compare and contrast, we still have a long way to go, but when I first got here, so I had been living in multiple cities in the US, multiple cities in Europe. I move out here, and I remember so distinctly, I had been out in the Valley maybe a month, and I was sitting at home at night thinking, I've made the worst possible mistake. Oh my God, this was such a mistake coming out here, because it seemed to me more different than the East Coast. I grew up in the East Coast. I started my career on the East Coast. Far harder to get my hands around than even living in Europe. It just was, it's like, oh my goodness, this feels like we're stepping 20 years back relative to male-female dynamics in the workplace. I'm trying to give myself a pep talk. It's like, you can figure this out, you can do this. And it does normalize, but it was, and now it doesn't feel normal because I've been out here for so long, but it was striking and it was jarring when you're used to something that's a little bit more balanced. That being said, I think that the Valley has made a huge, very significant steps forward, because a lot of the technology companies, because I could feel it when I first got out here, there was sort of a reckoning in the same time I got here of, hey, it's bad. Because that was when the analysis of, hey, where are all the females had started. And you I was at Cisco at the time, and you'd look at the numbers, you'd see, a good percentage of females coming into the workforce get stuck at a certain level and then leave because they were frustrated that they were stuck at that level. I see it getting better. That being said, I think the sort of societal angst that we're going through right now, very painful, very gut-wrenching, but it's airing out a lot of things, from a racial perspective, from a diversity of all facets perspective, that is good for us in the long term, painful and gut-wrenching to think about in the short term, but we have to air this out. So I see conversations that are happening in a lot of different companies now where people are knowing now that they can't just suppress oh, it's probably bad, but I just don't want to talk about it. Now it's out on the table at this point. And I hear it in a lot of the companies that I work with, where, diversity, how leaning forward should the company be? Should the CEO be? I had a conversation with the CEO about that this morning. That's a huge step forward. Has it been a gut-wrenching summer? Absolutely. But if this is what was necessary to sort of bubble up the sort of unconscious biases that have been floating and not spoken, but out there for a very long time, if this is what it took, let's try to get something good to come out of this, if I say problematic summer, that's an understatement. But I'm an optimistic person. I think there's good that can come out of this if we drive ourselves to have the conversations, to really look at this as what's been happening. Nobody could say that there aren't biases that are out there in the world that everybody carries around with them each day. And the more we can understand them, they're not going to disappear overnight, but the more that we can acknowledge they're there, understand how to think through them. I do personally believe if you can acknowledge the issues or the biases that you have, that's a big step forward to opening up going forward. So, I have to be optimistic. I have to believe that everything that we as a society, really at a global level, have had to contend with lately, that there's good out of this. And, I try to, do my part to help air it out and, make it okay to think about how can we do this? How can we do things differently? How can we be more inclusive? How can we take into account others' perspective more, and just start taking some productive steps towards someplace that's better than where we were this summer?
So my daughters are 10 and 12, and I go out of my way to make sure they understand that there is no glass ceiling. There's nothing they can't do. When you're coaching...
if I may say, that's the best thing you can do as a parent. That's the best thing you can do as a parent to any kid, but especially to girls, because they will hear from enough other people. No, you can't.
Yeah.
That's
unconditional love.
That's not your place.
Yeah.
But just the unconditional, you can do anything. You can do anything. You can do anything, just on repeat. Because I was very fortunate. That's what I had from my parents. You don't realize that it's like the unsung things of a parent and of a child that's hearing it. You don't realize how much that seeps in until the first time you hear somebody say, "You can't do that," and you're like, "Of course I can't, because my parents said I could, so here we go." And it makes a huge, huge difference.
And you see how years of that, of being told what you can't do, leads to decisions that are the product of unconscious bias when
Completely.
It comes to being in college or picking a career. So if you're coaching, let's say, the next generation of aspiring, female entrepreneurs, technologists, execs, et cetera, and they're looking to you as a role model, right? You've achieved so much. starting with, multiple engineering degrees, et cetera. What do you tell them in the face of the experiences that they might be having where they feel like the deck is stacked against them?
Take risks. If you stay in a box, you'll live in a box. If that's, you know what I mean. But women, so now to speak to the females that are listening, especially the technical females, and I had to get this out of my own head. So I believe I speak on behalf of a lot of the technical female community. We're the ones that had to double check our homework. We're, had to be an A, had to be perfect, stay in a lane. This is how we got our degrees, and this is how we, proceeded through all those early years to excel. And those characteristics were great then. They will not get you where you want to be, where you need to be, where you can be now. So you have to figure out how to reprogram your brain to let that go. And I speak to a lot of technical female groups, and kind of at the manager director level, I see it. I just want to shake them when we could all meet in person, shake them. It's like, get out of your cube, get out of your office. You've got to meet people. Reviewing that document one more time is not going to get anyone anywhere. It's not going to get you anywhere. You've got to meet people. You've got to broaden your horizons. You've got to get different experiences. You've got to talk to customers. You've got to develop your worldview and take risks. Have a perspective and feel comfortable in talking about it. Even when people disagree, that's fine. People don't need to agree with you all the time, but you need to have a point of view. You need to have a point of view, because that's what people will associate you with. Does this woman, person, whoever, did they have a vision, a compelling view that I want to follow? And you want to develop that so you get a followership of people that are like, I understand what she's saying. I think she can get us there. You want to be that person, and you're not going to be that person by staying in the same type of role, having the same type of experience, not meeting other people. Folks look at my background, they're like, Patty, are you schizophrenic? You have been all over the place. Like, I love it. I find it entertaining, and that's, you want to take roles that you find are amusing, and you'll learn, and there's something different. But I find with each role, I've gotten a very different perspective, and it's given me the confidence to say, I have a point of view, whether it's, how different geographies work, how different technologies work, how different personas within enterprise work together or not, or customers' needs, what their primary issues are, where the buying money is. You want to follow the money on when you're trying to sell something or position something. So I really encourage females, and sometimes it's against, especially the technical females, against our nature, because we want to stay in a box and double check our work, but you have to get out. You have to get out. And it's, since we were talking about the shelter in place and our current situation, this current situation makes it easy for our female community that has a tendency, and again, I would put myself in this category. I have to actively break myself of this habit every day to just, I'll stay indoors, I'll keep doing my work, everybody will recognize the great work that I'm doing, and you have to get out. And so, I encourage any female that's listening, you have to consciously go outside your comfort zone. You have to consciously seek new input, seek different experiences, seek different types of roles. Things that you find like frightening or scary, that's all good. That's all good. Take a risk. What is the worst that happens? You learn something, and you move on to the next role.
should be required listening for every girl, K through 12, at least in Silicon Valley, if not.
K through 12.
It's great advice, from someone who's lived it. So the time flies. We're bad out of time. I think we got through, I don't know, maybe the first few topics of the the list that we had. That's okay. We'll have more time. We'll have you back. But before I can let you go, I've got to get in one last question because I'm genuinely curious to hear the answer to this. Your advice for a younger version, like the girls I was asking you to just coach, your advice to Patty at that age.
Yeah, I mean, you might not recognize this in me given my current form, but I was very shy, very, very shy, very studious, very shy. I would encourage females that have that same tendency. It's like, what's the fun in that? What's the fun in that? Seek new opportunities, look for things that are fun. You can take control. You never know what's in front of you, and you never know what opportunities are there. When there's something of interest for you, grab it, pursue it, don't hesitate. Go get that experience. You will never regret it.
Of all the adjectives I might use to describe you, shy was not on the short list.
That's how I was, or my earlier me, and it was a conscious decision of, that's not fun. Let's try a different version. Let's try a different version of Patty. Let's try the out there version of Patty.
Well, Patty, we're about out of time. Like I said, maybe we'll have you back for another discussion where we actually discuss the topics that we had planned. But this was more fun. This was so much fun. Great speaking with you. Thank you for all the good wisdom. And to everyone in the audience, hope you enjoyed this discussion with Patty. We are back next week on AI and the future of work with another fascinating guest.